Now, a few days ago, I put out a tweet asking people to send in their drafts for me to rate in a YouTube video, and here are 5 of them. Right, so kicking things off, we've got a draft from FPL Prem Tipster. He's got a YouTube channel, which is very good actually, and I'm going to link it in the description below for you to check it out. He sent in his draft here. It's a 3-5-2. Johnson in goal, Reece James, Botman, Trent, and Ciso, Rashford, Saka, Bruno Fernandes, Mitoma, Haaland, and Jesus. And what I've done on the right, I've inputted the team into the DraftHound team building tool. You can find a link to sign up yourself in the description of this video, and I've rated it basically depending on my views on the team. Sam Johnston, his expected points I think are reflecting the fact he's not expected to start at the moment by DraftHound. In my opinion, I think he is. I think he's the first choice Crystal Palace goalkeeper now. It will remain to be seen in pre-season how he gets on, but I really do think he's a good option. Crystal Palace seem to have turned things around defensively under Hodgson, and I think he's got a good chance of getting saves bonus too. We all know the upside that Reece James brings along. I'm personally staying clear of him. I think with the Liverpool fixture first off, Chelsea are probably going to concede in that one with just how strong I think Liverpool are going to be this season. And his injury record, I think I want to see him put 4 or 5 games together in a run to prove that he's no longer sort of injury prone, and then he'll probably get in my team. Botman, I think, is decent. Unfortunately, he's got those Man City and Liverpool fixtures game week 2 and 3, which I think make him less of an option. Obviously, he's got Henry on the bench there who he could probably rotate with, which makes sense. And looking at the expected points, Botman is ahead of Henry for game week 1, which makes sense to go with him. I don't really need to say much more about Trent. He's obviously the best defender in the game, and Prem Tipster has gone for him. And Ciso, Rashford, Saka, Bruno Fernandes, and Mitoma in midfield. I like it. Thing is with Ciso is I'm just not sure he's going to play every game. I think we need to wait and see in terms of pre-season as to whether he's going to start. I think, you know, the form and how many games in minutes he plays in pre-season will tell us if he's going to start in the Premier League. If that all looks good and he's looking well to start, then I think he's a great option. I just think at the moment I'm a little bit scared of picking him just for those reasons. He's gone for Rashford, I think an excellent option based on how he performed last season. Saka, by far and away the best 8.5 million midfielder. Absolutely nailed for Arsenal, and he takes the penalties. Bruno Fernandes, same reason as Saka, really absolutely nailed for Man United. He even played last season when he was injured, and obviously he takes the penalties. And then Mitoma, personally, I think I actually prefer Mbumo to Mitoma, just because I think he's slightly more nailed. Brentford being in less competitions, of course, and Mbumo, he's likely to take the penalties now Tony's not around, whereas Mitoma doesn't really have any set pieces and could see some rotation when Brighton get into Europe. Haaland, captain, don't really need to say much about Haaland, and Jesus as the front two. I think that's the best front two in the game, really, and it's a smart decision to go with them. As for the bench, I think it's relatively strong. The only problem is if Enciso doesn't start, you're in a bit of trouble. I think maybe, in my opinion, picking an extra 4.5 million defender to allow for someone to come in if Enciso doesn't play, maybe going for someone like Cash and potentially downgrading Reece James to Gabriel, because last season, even though obviously Reece James missed a lot of last season, Gabriel had the best XG of all defenders. So Prem Tipster, if you're watching this, those are the changes I'd make. Okay, next up we've got the FPL lad. He's gone for Ramsdale in goal, Estupinian, Shaw, Alexander-Arnold and Stones in defence. I think that's a really strong back line. The only thing I would say is I feel like going for an Arsenal defender, someone like Gabriel, is better than going for Ramsdale in goal, because you can probably pick a 4.5 million goalkeeper who can at least match Ramsdale for points, just because I feel like they're going to make more saves. And then Gabriel I prefer to Stones just for slightly more nailedness. I know Stones playing in that midfield position is going to play, you know, pretty much every game, but he is quite injury prone, whereas Gabriel, you can pretty much bank him to start every game, and his expected goal stats are better. So maybe those are the changes I'd make there. It's gone for Enciso, Rashford, Salah, and Mbumo and Mitoma in midfield. I made my comments really on Enciso there. Perhaps dropping some value out of Ramsdale and Stones will allow you to upgrade Enciso. Maybe going for someone like Eze instead, who, you know, it might not quite be as explosive or have the explosive potential that Enciso could have. He's going to play every game, and I think that's really important, particularly looking at your bench, mate, because you've got Bell, Surridge, and Archer there. Bell's probably going to play every game, but he's a Luton defender. Like, I would say if one of your players isn't likely to start, you'd prefer to make a transfer than have someone come off your bench. So if there's any way you can reduce some value in your team to improve that bench, I think would be a good move too. The rest of the midfield, I've spoken about them in the last draft, really. Rashford, Salah, and Mbeumo and Matoma. I think it's great that you've managed to fit Salah in there. I think he's going to have a wonderful season, particularly the fact that Liverpool have really improved their midfield. The signings of Szoboszlai, McAllister, remains to be seen the impact of Henderson potentially leaving him for Fabinho too. That could have a detrimental impact, but the signings they've made so far, I think, are really going to improve Liverpool, both going forwards and defensively. So Salah is a really good option, and you've done well to get him in your draft. I spoke about Mbeumo, and then Matoma, in my opinion, is the second best 6.5 million mid. So you've done well to get all of those in. Haaland captain is an obvious call, and yeah, I like this draft. I'd say there are a few changes I would make, which is why I've rated it 7.5. But if you make those changes, strengthen that bench a little bit, maybe find an alternative to Enciso, and downgrade Ramsdale to a 4.5 and potentially Stones to a 5.0 like Gabriel. Next up, we've got a good mate of mine who has a great YouTube channel talking about Sky FF and FPL. I'll link FFBobby's YouTube channel down in the description as well. He's gone for Leno in goal, which is an interesting option, is his 4.5 million keeper. To be honest, I don't think there's a lot between most of the 4.5 keepers. Personally, as I said, I think I prefer Sam Johnston. I think he's the best 4.5 million keeper, or at least whoever starts for Crystal Palace. I think of those 4.5 million keepers, the Palace ones have the most likelihood of keeping clean sheets. Estupiñán, a fantastic option. I don't really need to talk about much about him. He's the most picked defender in the game for a reason. Matty Cash, he gets off to a tough start with Newcastle away, but after then, Everton and Burnley, two fantastic fixtures, and I actually think he's probably the best 4.5 million defender in the game. Just with, I think, Aston Villa are really going to turn things up defensively this season, and they did last season under Emery as well. And first fixture's difficult, granted, but then Everton and Burnley, two great games. He's probably the most attacking of the 4.5 million Villa defenders, as well. Trent and Gabriel, two of the best defenders in the game. Trent, I don't really say much about him, and Gabriel's got the best XG of all the defenders. Another one that's gone for Enciso. Again, I think I'd maybe look to drop some value from other areas of your team. Maybe dropping Son to Martinelli would allow you to upgrade Enciso to someone like Matoma, just someone who's going to play more football. I think Son could be great, and I really like him as an option. Personally, I'm going to go for him, but I think with the way your team's structured, you should consider maybe dropping him for someone slightly cheaper to upgrade Enciso, because similar to the other teams we've seen, the bench is quite weak in my opinion. And again, if one of your starting 11 isn't going to play, you'd be more likely, I think, to make a transfer than drop to your bench. So yeah, for that reason, a couple of changes there would make that team really good for me. And then Jesus and Haaland up front, two really strong strikers, probably the best front two in the game. And I've rated it an 8.5. And as you can see from DraftHound, you got 56.8 expected points in game week 1. Running through these, aren't they? Another good friend of mine with another good YouTube channel, Dream Team Professor. He's gone for Pickford in goal, and quite interestingly, a 5-4-1, which is a formation that we've not seen from any of these other drafts. And looking at it, I don't mind it. And I'm going to talk through why I don't mind it. So Pickford in goal. I've spoken about who I think the best 4.5 million goalkeeper is. Dream Team Professor obviously has his opinion. I think it's going to be Sam Johnston. And to be honest, looking at those fixtures, Everton don't get off to a bad start at all. Estupiñán, don't really to speak about him. Again, he's the most picked defender in the game for a reason. I quite like this 5 at the back with Shaw and Stones in it, because comparing them to someone like Enciso, I know he's a midfielder, a more attacking position for the same price, but you've got to think both of these guys are more likely to start most games, and I'd suggest their points potential is very similar. I'd suggest that Shaw and Stones are as likely to keep a clean sheet as Enciso is to score a goal, and particularly Luke Shaw. I think he's got a good attacking upside beyond that as well. So across the season, I would suggest Shaw's more likely to score more points than Enciso. Stone's not quite as much, because I just don't think he's quite as attacking, but I really like the 5-4-1, and then replacing a popular midfielder like Enciso with another defender, I think makes good logical sense. If that's not the way you thought about things, then Dream Team Professor, then fair enough, but that's a byproduct of the team you've made, I think. And then Gabriel, I've spoken about him. I think he's one of the best 5.0 defenders in the game, with certainly the best expected goal stats. Martinelli, I've recommended him for a couple of other teams. Arsenal get off to a great start. They won't have Europe for 4 or 5 weeks, so I don't think we have to worry about rotation for him. It looks like, I was a little bit worried about Havertz potentially taking his place, but it looks like Havertz is going to be playing slightly deeper in the midfield, so Martinelli, I think, is pretty nailed on to start the first 3 or 4 fixtures, should he perform well. And to be honest, if he's not performing well, you probably want to take him out of your team anyway. Rashford, Saka and Foden. I'm not too sure about Phil Foden. I think you could probably do better or go for someone more expensive, and I'll tell you how you can do that later on. And then Haaland up front. The reason I've rated this team 7.5, mate, is purely because of the bench. Now, I actually think your bench is a little bit too strong. I think you could drop Ferguson for maybe someone like Adebayo, 5 million striker for Luton, and then also drop Enzo for someone like Ndombele, just so you have a couple of bench options that are likely to play. And then you could probably upgrade someone like Phil Foden by, well, what can you do? So you can drop Ferguson to someone for 5 million. So that brings you 1 million in the bank. And then Enzo to someone 4.5 million. That's 1.5 million in the bank to spend on Foden. You could go for Son instead of Foden. And I think that would make your team pretty good. I said pretty a lot then. Yeah, I think those are the changes I'd make. I just think the bench is too expensive, really, and that's why I've rated it that way. A few changes, though, and I reckon you're there. And then last but not least, a loyal subscriber of mine, Ben Alden11 on Twitter. He's gone for Pickford in goal, Estupinian, Zinchenko, Trent and Gabriel in a 4-5-1 with Salah, Bruno, Saka and Mbumo and Ciso and Haaland as his 11. And then he's gone for Areola, Bell, Semenyo and Archer. Just looking at this team on face value, again, I'd say some people have had benches that are too expensive and some have had them that are a little bit too cheap. And I think this bench is probably a little bit too cheap. Unfortunately, I think with the way your team's structured, I'd recommend trading Salah out for someone, just allowing you to potentially obviously replace Ciso, who I think is just too much of a doubt for minutes. So, you know, dropping him to someone like Rashford, another Arsenal midfielder, or Son would allow you to both upgrade Ciso and then also upgrade your bench. The reason I say upgrade your bench, again, it's similar to other teams, really. If you have a player that's gotten injured or isn't going to start or something like that, falling out of favour with the manager, etc., you're going into a transfer to replace them, really. I'm not going to be expecting to rely on Bell to score me points off the bench. So for that reason, I'd have someone like Matty Cash on your bench just to cover, and then you'd be perfectly happy for someone like him to come in just for 1 week if a player has a short-term injury. Those are the kind of things I'd be thinking about. Other than that, though, mate, it's a lovely team. All right, and that's the end of the video. 5 drafts in total looked at there. I might make another one later on during pre-season. I just simply didn't have time. I'm really sorry to respond to all of the tweets that I had in response to my requests. There were just so many, and I really appreciate all of you coming back to me. I'll try on Twitter to reply to all of them with a little rating or a suggestion if they didn't make it into the YouTube video. As I said, the guys that have a YouTube channel of teams that I've rated, please check them out in the description because they're absolutely excellent. And yeah, please give them a watch and a subscribe. If you enjoyed this video, please leave me a like, rating and subscribe to the Golden Goal channel, which should be just there. And I'll catch you in the next one.